All right. Hi. Welcome to the Sensation and Perception course for Summer B. That's EXP3204. So I made an announcement yesterday saying I'd get this video posted. It took me maybe a day to get it ready here, but here we are. Um, Hopefully my announcement has basically covered everything you need to know. So I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can. I always say that, and I always talk too much. So sorry in advance. What I want to do is I want to go through the syllabus and maybe just hit some high points, hit some important things that you're going to maybe need to know. And um, then I'll go through the modules too and just kind of give a quick little tour of what's in the modules. So here we are on the home page, and I'm going to click the simple syllabus here. So um, read the syllabus, of course, right? Um, I'm just going to explain a couple of things here in the midst of the syllabus as soon as it loads, if it's going to load. There we are. All right, well, there I am. A couple things here. Office hours, so Mondays and Thursdays at 1 to 3 p.m., all throughout the summer B term. Um, I think that it's a fair thing to say that almost every single one of those days I will be physically in my office here in the Psych Building, 356 shows right there. Um, there's a off chance that I might not come in on one of those days, but the Zoom will always be open. So you can rely on that Zoom link right there below it. So just click the link and I'll have it ready, and you can just pop in, right? So this is, you don't have to schedule a time or anything like that. Just anytime in that interval between 1 and 3 o'clock, um, click the Zoom link and you're good to go. But of course, if you want to come into the office, like I said, I would expect to find me here pretty much every single one of those days. Um, I am also available outside of those hours as well. So if those don't work for you, just let me know and we can try to find a time to meet. Lily is our TA. I will ask her to post an announcement and say more. Let's see. I don't need to read all of this stuff to you here. The book, the course materials link. I don't think that link actually works. I won't bother testing it now, but the course materials link is in the left-hand navigation over here. Or it's somewhere else if you're using various mobile versions of the app here. But click that, opt in, get the textbook. You're going to want that textbook because it's pretty critical for a couple of things. The chapter quizzes first and foremost. So those there, I'll show you on the grading section and the schedule that shows all the deadlines. But we'll have many chapter quizzes due. Turns out that's a big part of your grade is going to be a bunch of these quizzes, and the questions on these quizzes come directly with the textbook, right? One big package, textbook and a bunch of quiz questions. So these are quizzes where you get two tries and the highest score counts. There's no timer or anything like that. So what you're going to want to do is take your time, go through the book, read it, take the quiz, have the book open while you're taking the quiz, even so you can find the answer somewhere in the book and get the question right, ideally. Um, there's also a lot of stuff in the book that I won't necessarily cover in the lectures. Conversely, there's a lot of stuff in my lectures that's not in the book. So, kind of a thing here with this class is that this class is my area of expertise, sensation and perception. My degree completed 100 years ago in the previous century was in sensory psychology, doing perception action research. And so I have a lot of my own thoughts on the topic, and even the topic of perception and action, I think, is something that we should cover in this course, but it is given fairly minimal coverage in the book, which is pretty standard, I think, for most books. But we're going to have some lectures on that. And when it comes time to taking exams, then things are going to change. So, two reasons for the book. One is those quizzes. Two is to learn things about sensation and perception that are not in the lectures or any other resources that I have to give you. So, you're going to want to make sure you read that book to learn what you need to learn about this topic here. Got the letter grade scale there, no pluses and minuses, 90, 80, 70, 60. I do round up. It says that in here somewhere. Um, I will try to keep this fast, as I said. So here's what contributes to your grade to get the 90, 80, 70, 60%. It's all about earning points, right? So take take the points that you have earned, divide by the points possible, and you can get your percentage grade, and that's where it will shake out at the end of the semester. We're going to have 3 exams, so we got 6 weeks here. It's going to go fast. We're going to subdivide it into three 2-week long units as best we can. Starting on a Wednesday is kind of weird, so we'll live with that. So each of these exams is 60 points, and so that means we have 180 total points coming from those 3 exams. I mentioned the quizzes. Right? There's going to be 13 of those. We'll drop one. So that's 12 times 20 points each, and that's 240. And then there's 2 brief papers there in the middle, 50 points each. I'll explain those in a second. So let's do that. Let's scroll on down to the section on, well, there's a little section on AI right there. I don't see much of a need to assign AI in this course. I know it's kind of a thing in a lot of courses now where they want us to have you use AI for some reason or another. But the goal of this course is for you to learn the basics of sensation and perception. And so answering the quiz questions or exam questions, I don't see how AI is going to help you there. Obviously, it can do it for you, but if you really want to offload your cognition to AI to take your assignments for you, I don't see the point. I'll leave it at that. Same goes for these brief papers. It would kind of defeat the entire point of taking the course if you're just going to have AI try to write these things for you. I would be suspicious that even one of the options for these papers is something the AI could potentially even do. So I have my policy there, which is that it is prohibited. Uh, I'm sorry that this formatting is all weird here, so I'll try to fix that. I don't recall it looking like that before. So exams are labeled here as lecture exams, and it explains in a little more detail that there are multiple choice questions and also 2 written questions worth 10 points each. And it's largely derived from the lectures. There is a little bit of overlap in a couple of places between what I'm covering in those lectures and what's in the book. So, of course, the book can supplement and do double duty there, but primarily it's the lecture that will be the critical source material for these exam questions. Got the quiz described here. I already did that. Let's talk about these brief papers here. So 2 brief papers, and so there's in the modules. I'll show you the module real quick. There is a kind of a detailed instructions paper that goes into a little more detail about what each type is like. But here's a summary that says there are 5 different types of papers to pick from. So option number 1 is a sensory experience introspection. So you're going to have an experience of any sort that you want and try to introspect about the nature of the sensory experience that accompanies that. You can pick a journal article from a list that I have in the modules, and you can write a summary and critique of that article. You can conduct a perception experiment. I will show you maybe more about what that means once I open that detailed instruction document. Then there's a sensation and perception in art. So analyze some work of art from a perceptual perspective. And the fifth option is to analyze an illusion. So again, I'll go to the detailed instructions here in a minute, and I will say a little bit more. Okay, 50 points per paper. Deadlines are all in here. So under class schedule, in our first week here, we need to get started. Week 1 academic activity quiz first and foremost. Here I have the deadline set to 6/26. That's maybe not correct. When I set it up, I decided to set the deadline to Sunday the 28th, just to make sure you got some flexibility there. But even still, the availability window extends beyond the 28th, right? I'm going to you can keep on taking this thing up and through a whole extra week. Of course, it's just 2 points, right? You just go in there and say true to the question, I am here. And you're going to get 2 free points in the grade book, so that's extra credit. It also, of course, serves as an academic record of your presence, and that's kind of the critical thing we're supposed to do. When it comes to actual assignments that count towards a grade, our first real deadline day is the second Friday of the summer term, July 3rd. And that's when we have the chapters 1 through 4 quizzes all available and due on that day. Now, my usual adage is that that's a lot to do, apparently, on 7/3, but I always like to say the due date is not the due date. And what I mean by that is that the due date, DUE due date, is not the DO due date, right? These quizzes are open now, and there's really no reason that you shouldn't start working on them now and work ahead. That's why you might also notice here that I have listed under week one readings chapters one and two. So, in my perspective here, is that starting today, if not already, you should be reading chapters one and two in the textbook and taking the associated quizzes so that as we move into next week, to the last couple of days of June, heading into the beginning of July, that what we're going to do is you're going to be reading chapters three and four, and that way during the week next week you can also then complete chapter three and four quizzes. Heading into the weekend, then due on Sunday 7/5 is our first exam. So of course during all of this time, in addition to reading those quiz chapters and taking those quizzes, you should also be watching the lectures that are linked in the Unit 1 module. I'll show you that in a second. I am aware, of course, that that exam falls the day after a major holiday. So one thing I will note is that this exam also opens up early. So again, the due date is not necessarily the due date, right? You don't have to wait until 9 or 10 p.m. on Sunday 7/5 to do this exam. You can do it earlier in the week if you want to. So just plan ahead, plan accordingly. If you have holiday weekend plans, then definitely try to plan ahead and take this exam in advance. Moving beyond that, then we go into week three. We're going to be covering other chapters there, five, six, and eight. So we are skipping chapter seven in the book. So we'll have quizzes for those. But the brief, first off, though, on the Sunday the 12th, that's the first brief paper deadline. Then we'll move into week four, covering chapters 9 and 10. And then all of those chapter quizzes again are due chapters 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10 will all be due on Friday the 17th. But again, spread that out and submit those quizzes, throughout that 2 week period there, weeks 3 and 4. And then we take the exam two on the 19th, or again, it opens ahead of time. So plan it and do it in advance. And then to wrap up the summer term, in the final 2 weeks, we have on the 26th, the second brief paper is due, and you're going to be reading chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, taking quizzes for them, due on July 31st. And importantly here, note that our last exam, the exam three, also is due on Friday, July 31st. And that's just the way in which the summer term is ending, so we need to get it all done. So that way, we get it all done, and then I can get all this stuff graded and get grades submitted to the registrar on time. So we're going to finish then everything on 7/31. Again, that's all going to open in advance of the deadline, so you can spread it out and get things done ahead of time. About those exams, each one of these exams, as I said, is drawn heavily from the lecture content, and it applies only to the lectures in the unit that they are in. So there's 3 units here, unit 1, 2, 3, and you can think of these exams as a unit 1 exam, unit 2 exam, unit 3 exam, so forth. The rest of the syllabus, you can read all of this, right? We got a bunch of policies here. Most of this stuff is automatically inserted from UCF, and so I think we got all of that. Let's go to the modules. So you're going to see in the syllabus module the link to this video here as soon as I am done publishing it. And but also here is these brief paper detailed instructions. So here are the instructions for the sensory experience introspective analysis. Pick any kind of an experience and then try to describe the sensorium, right? The nature of the sensory experience that you're having, right? Not just what you're doing, but what are the actual, strip it down to its really elemental sensory qualities. Says a lot of that right there. Have the evaluation criteria, what we're looking for there. Article 2, or Assignment 2 is article summary and critique. So there's some journal articles in the modules, and you're going to pick one, and then it says right here, write a 1-page summary and a 1-page critique of that paper, and then also what we're looking for here. Assignment 3 is to do a perception experiment. So here I'm not asking for a full-blown, well-controlled, IRB approved human subjects data collection kind of project here, right? You can design an experiment where you might just test yourself or test your roommate or a friend or a family member or maybe two or three people as an informal kind of observational study. You could do all kinds of stuff here, right? And so here's just one simple example. We might ask a question such as, does color affect taste perception, right? So what would happen, for example, if you made five little cups of sugar water, maybe, right? But you used five different food colorings in each of those cups, so that they have the literal exact same amount of sugar in each case, but does the color affect the perceived sweetness level? So you could maybe have a couple of people just taste and rate the sweetness levels to see if there's any kind of significant differences there. Um, Another possibility is that you could test the effect of other kinds of stimuli, like does if let's say you're playing music in the background, and maybe you have a couple of different kinds of music, and does one sort of music make the drink taste sweeter or not, or does it make it taste like something else, right? Um, there's some research of people doing this kind of stuff, and so you could kind of maybe try some of that for yourself. It doesn't have to be a taste experiment. It could be a visual perception experiment, whatever you might think of, right? And you might have various ideas that come up as you're reading the book or listening to the lectures. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to write up what your basic idea was about, like, what's the hypothesis, what are you testing, and describe your procedures and everything, and describe any observations and data that you might have collected and interpreted appropriately. We have our evaluation criteria for that. For art, just pick a work of art and describe it and analyze it and try to understand it in terms of a sensory or perceptual point of view. And last are illusions. So in this case, pick two illusions and to dedicate one page for each illusion. So describe the illusion. It's best if you can, if it's especially if it's a visual illusion, if you can kind of copy and paste a picture of it into the paper, so I know what it is. I know most of the illusions, but still post it in there so I know exactly what you're talking about. Um, and then explain, what's happening and why it works, right? What's our best scientific explanation for what causes the illusion to happen? And again, we have our evaluation criteria in here. So that's that. Let's go back to the modules again. Let me quickly show you the papers. So if I scroll down here, there's a module you shouldn't see there because it's just unpublished. Journal articles approved for brief paper option 2, right? And here they are. There's just a bunch of PDFs that you can just poke around in here if you're going to choose this option, and find a paper that you like and write it up. There is a note somewhere in here that you can go beyond the provided list, but you're going to need to clear it with me first. We want to make sure that what you're summarizing and critiquing is a paper that's appropriate to the topic of the course, and that it is an experiment paper, right? It's not just a theoretical review paper or anything like that. Let me talk about the modules real quick before we wrap it up. So back up here, Unit 1 module. I don't have links to the readings here. You're just going to need to go to the course materials link and read the chapters here. But when you read Chapter 1, you can come to the module, take the Chapter 1 quiz. Under Chapter 1 supplements, I've just assembled a variety of different things that are, maybe helpful materials here. Some stuff about psychophysics and Weber's law, perhaps, that might be useful. So you can, none of this stuff is necessary, that you're going to need to click every one of these and watch every video or read every little thing that's here. But, give it a shot. If you want to explore the material with a little more depth, try to find a little extra clarity, some different way of explaining it that might make it make more sense, then check all of this stuff out. And then the rest of us should look the same. So we have Chapter 2 supplements. We got some more stuff there, the quiz, and then the supplements. We got Chapter 3 and some supplements. There's actually a journal article here as well. I thought that would be useful for that. And Chapter 4, and again with some supplements. And then down at the bottom of the module are lectures and lecture supplements. What is that supplement business? Well, each one of these is primarily a link, links out to YouTube, where I have the kind of this chapter one-ish kind of stuff about the problems of what makes studying sensation and perception worthwhile and why it's important and why it's also challenging. So that's broken out into four parts, and then I've got some stuff on psychophysics and perceptual constancy. But then there's some demos and a blog that also unpack this in ways that I think complement the lectures, so you can check that out. And then the Unit 2 module works about the same. I don't have any supplements for Chapter 5, but for Chapter 6, I do have a few supplements linked there. I don't have any extra supplements for Chapters 8, 9, or 10, but then now we have the lectures. So again, we're going to see main lectures and a couple supplemental links here as well, including some extra little videos that I've made and a Word document and a couple of PDFs and various other things. There's a lot of extra kind of lecture supplements here that expand out on perception action research. This is where I'm kind of unpacking that whole idea of perception action that I was mentioning. That's kind of stuff that I like to do. That's not necessarily covered that much in the book. Unit 3 doesn't have a ton of supplements for the chapters, so just go through and read the chapters and take the quizzes. And then we got the lectures. So more perception and action business down in here, lectures and supplements all on that particular topic. And uh, that I think is everything I needed to say. So, of course, don't forget to come to my office hours if you have questions. Send me inbox message over here if you have questions. One thing I almost forgot to say on those brief paper assignments, um, you have to do two of those. So you cannot use the same option for both. So if you choose option number one, which is a sensory introspective analysis for the first submission, you're going to need to choose one of the other options for the second submission, right? So you have to do an analysis of art or an analysis of an illusion for the second one, right? So you can't repeat the same type of paper twice. Okay, well, I think that now covers it. So again, let me know if you have questions.